Hi, I am Ada Bobineau. I am so glad that you all are joining us, continually following us for the San Antonio Black International Film Festival, our wonderful magical theme, Animation in Black. Today, we are going to bring in illustrators that work heavily in the industry. They're very widely known and respected in their profession, and just talk to them about their world, what that entails as artists, and just get some insight into the world of illustration. So I'd like to bring from Philly, the infamous Eric Battle, and from Montreal, Canada, we have Jose Holder. Welcome, gentlemen.
What's up?
Hello.
What's up?
Thanks for having us.
Oh, thank you. Because I know Eric, every time I talk to Eric, it's like, oh, I got so much going on. And so it's wonderful that you all could be with us today.
It's a pleasure.
Just first, for me, it's always very important to,
It's a pleasure.
Oh, I thought you said, okay, good. For me, it's always very important to get a sense of who you are, what your background is, and how you kind of ventured into the world of illustration and art, and everything that you do. I know it's a mixture of a whole bunch of mediums that you work with. But let's Eric, let's start with you, Philly homegrown, and just tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, where you're from, how you got into illustrations.
All right. Well, again, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here and speaking with you both. I've admired both of your works for a while. But yeah, my name is Eric Battle. I'm an illustrator. I live here in the city of Philadelphia. My interest in art and illustration started, I'd say, when I was probably about like 5 or 6 years old. I remember going to the corner store with my mother and seeing a rack of comic books, and I ran over and I'm looking at these things, and I'm just like amazed at the color and the drawings and all of the action, and like really from there it was a love affair at first sight. So my mother, she bought me a couple of comic books, and I was just transfixed from that moment on, whereby my sisters and friends would be outside playing. I'd be in my room, and as long as I had like a couple of sheets of paper and a pencil, I was in my own world. And so I started off trying to copy the drawings, of course.
At 5.
What's that?
At 5 years old.
Yeah.
Wow.
And then I got tired of like copying the drawings, and I started to think about like, well, how are these images being made? And so again, my mother, she recognized that I was, that the artwork held my interest. So she started to like enroll me in different like, youth art classes and things like that. And again, like sometimes she would bring me just a ream of paper, and just getting a stack of like blank paper was like Christmas to me. So, it's like, I guess, pretty low maintenance kid. And, from there, I attended University of the Arts here in Philadelphia, graduated from there with a degree in illustration. The thing is, when I was in college, I kind of wanted to steer away from comic books, because in my head, I wanted to paint. I wanted to paint like Time magazine covers, and illustrate like album cover artwork and things like that. But when I was as a student in an arts college, I recognized that the teachers kind of looked down on comic books, but at the same
Really?
time, yeah, because they weren't considered high art, you know. So the thing is, I did recognize that to draw comic books, I needed to know how to draw everything. You know, I needed to learn perspective and anatomy, storytelling. You know, I needed to know how to, just how to put together all of these scenes. So I kind of, I kind of went back to like that being the, I guess the main thrust of my artwork, because I recognized with those skills, I had a bit of a leg up on some of the other students who were only focused on like drawing still life, paintings, things like that. And like I didn't always need a model to draw a figure. So I kind of leaned back into that. And then by the time I graduated in '89, a lot of the fields of illustration that I was interested in previously had kind of like, they were kind of dying out. And I recognized that, again, in comic books, there's architecture, there's graphic design, there's fashion design, all of these elements that I was interested in anyway. But like if I was doing children's books, and I'd done some children's book work for a while, but in all of these other fields, they were kind of limiting, and you were kind of like pigeonholed into doing one particular thing. So I was like, well, okay, comic books, I can do everything that I want to do, and in one medium. So yeah, that's.
I don't think people even realize the skill that it takes to get just a frame of comic. I mean, I don't think people. What you just said blew me away. I know it was, but that you have graphic arts, you have architecture, you have all that in a single frame of a comic book. So we're gonna talk about that. That's interesting. It's really interesting. So, what about you, Jose? In terms of your background, where you grew up in, I know you're in Montreal now, but are you from the States or you're from Canada?
Actually, I was born in London, England, and grew up in LA, and then skipped over here with my mom to Montreal, and my journey began here, I guess. But it's funny because my formative years are all in LA, so it's kind of weird. That's what I call home in a sense.
Okay. So I mean, so tell us about growing up. Were you a prodigy too, or you discovered yourself reading it?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me. It's really great to be here. I don't do a lot of these, so this is a lot of fun. It's great to meet Eric.
I know I had to coax you. I was like, "Come on, Jose, you can do
it." You had to. Yeah. But thank you for doing that, and for introducing me to Eric. I think we're gonna have a lot of great discussions in the future. So my story. My name is Jose Holder, and I'm an illustrator / director / writer producer here in Montreal, Quebec, Canada. And my story is so similar to Eric's, it's not even funny. When I first came to this country with my mom, as I understand this being retold to me as an adult, there was some unease for me as a youngster. I think about 4. The age of 4 is when I came over here, and as I understand it, my mom had bought me, those spinner rack days way back when you would find like a surprise pack with like 3 comic books, surprise, you didn't know what they were.
Cracker Jacks?
It's sort of like that, but it could be in a paper bag or just something that was obscure, so you wouldn't see what the prizes were inside. And I remember opening it and seeing 3 comics. I think one was like a Richie Rich, one was a DC comic, and one was a Wonder Woman comic. And from that point, I was smitten. I mean, as an only child, you sort of retreat into your own worlds, And as a child of the 70s, I mean, really, was there ever a better period for television and film? And so we grew up on some crazy, crazy TV, and it really piqued my imagination. Shows like um, uh, The Other Side, you know, Amazing Stories, Alfred Hitchcock Presents. I immediately became a horror buff, and I started drawing really early, just as Eric said, copying a lot of the works I'd seen. And very soon, like probably grade 1 or grade 2, I started to get a little bit of feedback. And as creatures of habit, we sort of gravitate towards what we're validated for, right? So I could see that people responded to artwork. And so I kept doing it. But back then, I didn't know anything about comic book conventions. I don't know if there were any back then, but there wasn't a community of people that I could access to know what the scope of my what the possibilities were for us as illustrators. So going to school, you sort of create these little these tiny groups, these niches with other illustrators, and comic book stores were up and about at that time, and I would spend hours at a time sitting on the floor of comic book stores, just you know what I mean? They'd have to kick me out because I didn't have any money. I would just I would just love going through that stuff. And I think what happened, I mean, high school happened, right? And you get sidetracked and you realize that a lot of artists are being pulled in different directions, maybe by their parents or just by life in general. And you become an island unto yourself. At least I did. So I tried to figure out at the time, when you're in those early formative years, what can I do with my illustration to make money? What's my job going to be? What can I register for in college or university? And so architecture was one of those things that I had at the back of my mind to keep the pencil in my hand. Like Eric, I mean, we know we have a leg up, right? We have a tiny advantage. And for a time, I went through an architectural program. And I graduated from that with a degree. But you keep getting called back, right? For that loose, organic, creative line work. And by that time, I had access to friends who were part of bullpens. And it's then that I realized that the power in community was very, very important. And I think it still exists to this day. It's really important to know who your extended brothers and sisters are from every background in the industry. And I still couldn't figure out a way to make a living from it because for the most part, that market was an American market, whether on the East or West Coast, but I didn't have money to travel back and forth. So it was all about manila envelopes and photocopying, and Eric's laughing. Yeah, a lot of money was spent sending packages to the big two and other companies. And in the meantime, I took up contracts doing graphic arts after the architectural stint. And soon after that, I opened up my own school for illustration. Something happened that sparked something for me. I think it's one of the questions you were going to ask, but I'm going to jump in early. I had to relearn art in a sense that allowed me to access all of the things that Eric was talking about. Facial features, anatomy, clothing, lighting, all that stuff. And so I went back to the basics of stick form. And I sort of like recreated a system for myself. And when I realized I had something special, I shared it with my friends who were also illustrators. And they were like, listen, you have to do something with this. You have to share it. And so I opened up a little school. And during that period, for about 10 years or so, we had hundreds of students come through, and we just taught the fundamentals of illustration. Right?
This was in LA then? This was in LA?
This is in Montreal.
It's in Montreal. You're back in Montreal. Okay.
Yeah. And during that period, I got exposed to storyboarding for television and film, and that's when I sort of diversified my my portfolio in a sense. And I always held on to entertainment, film, television as my muse, and so it was. I mean, the cinematic quality translated very well to comic books, and so it was easy to sort of tell stories in that medium. And yeah, I sort of made a career as a storyboard artist, and now as a concept artist in video games, and I've ended up at Warner Brothers Games, Montreal.
Nice.
Wow. I mean, fascinating. I'm like, I opened up a little school. Like, how you open up a school? like that's major. That's
But it
major.
started off as a bullpen. I knew I wanted to open up a school, but I also had some extra space to bring in other artists because I understood the power in community and sort of like feeding off each other's energy, right? And some of them would teach, some of them would just stay in the back and work on DC or Marvel comics or whatever. And I got to learn from them at the same time, so it was great.
A lot of synergy there.
That's right.
So it seemed like you all were supported. I've been talking to some other people and the parents, no, you have to be a doctor. You have to be so it didn't seem like you had the support of your mothers. It seemed like they recognized what you had, the gifts you had early on and supported you. So you all were very blessed in that sense that you didn't get screwed away from that. I mean, were the animators the nerds? Were the illustrators the nerds? I mean, of school?
Absolutely.
I'm just curious. Y'all were growing up. You are awkward teens, kind of like in your own world because you had shit going on in your head all the time while everybody else was doing their thing.
Yeah, I'd say absolutely. Because again, it's like the thing is, so like I was a quiet kid anyway. But so in grade school, I was quiet, and I was for a period of time, I was the shortest kid in the class. But the thing is, I recognized that because I could draw, the other kids like kind of
accepted you.
They were drawn to me. And then so like, when I found, my group of friends who we all like comic books, so that, those were the connecting tissues between the disparate groups of people in like, especially in grade school and in high school also. I was very, very quiet in high school because to me, it was like, I could be in a crowd of people, and I just like to watch. I just like to watch people, how they interacted, movements, that was the stuff that I was always paying attention to,
Wow. So in terms of, I don't know, how did you get into the comic book realm? I mean, I know you grew up with comic books, you started with comic books, but the trajectory of moving into that realm where you actually had opportunities to turn this into something lucrative and career oriented with your drawings. I mean, how did that start from school or from your school or whatever? What introduced you into, because it's I mean, you have to get in, you have to get your foot in the door at some point. So how was?
Yeah, that starts with the conventions.
Okay.
And so like in Philadelphia, there were always conventions. So, just again, finding out, like doing whatever research you could at the time, well before Google and everything like that. But, finding out about conventions, I remember like the first time I'd gone to a convention in here in Philadelphia, just actually seeing that there were actual like editors there. And so a lot of it for me was kind of just like learning as you go, because I didn't know anybody at least in the early years, I didn't know anybody who was actually, working in the industry. But you would kind of like read some of the, I would buy some of the comic book magazines, like magazines about the industry, so reading interviews of of different comic book artists, and they would talk about how they would take their portfolios up to New York. If they lived in Canada, or other cities, they would go to New York. So I was like, okay, I'm going to get a portfolio together, and I'm going to take it up to New York, and hope somebody pays attention. But yeah, it's the conventions. So the very first time I sent, so well okay, like rolling back, it's like understanding that you had to put together a portfolio pack, at least a package of sequential pages to show an editor or an art director. So it's like you would work on, I worked on like 5 to 6 sequential pages. At my first sample packet that I sent out, I had drawn a story. It was like Silver Surfer versus Thor, because they were my favorite characters. And I sent them into Marvel, and I got a response from an editor. The thing, and he liked what I sent in, but he sent me a script, and I didn't. I guess it was a sample script, but they don't tell you what to do. So I was like, okay, I guess they don't tell you, they really don't tell you anything. He didn't tell me like what he was looking for in a time frame or anything.
No direction. No direction.
No direction. So what I did, I was like, okay, I picked out like a 5-page sequence, but again, because they don't tell you any kind of time frame, I was like, oh, I need to get this done as quickly as possible, and I rushed it. It's like thinking, I didn't take the time to like make sure everything, like the perspective was correct and all of those things. Because I'm thinking, oh, they must want this back right away. So again, I was excited to get a response the first time out, but when I realized that what I sent back in was not up to par, because they don't give you a response. You don't get a response if the stuff isn't
right. If they don't want it.
Yeah, they don't want it. So it's like I was kind of crushed, but I realized it was definitely a learning experience, because I spent the next couple of years trying to like get a response again. So it's like I would go to work. I was working at hotels, or just whatever jobs I could get.
This was in your 20s?
Yeah. Like in college and out of college. Like, oh yeah, I want to do this. So I would go to work, and sometimes I would get off work late at night, but I would go home and sit up, trying to think of another like 5-page sequence, because I was like, okay, well, I've got to show anatomy, I've got to show perspective, I've got to show storytelling, the acting of the characters, and start teaming up with other friends who were also trying to get into the industry. We all start to learn like what our strengths are, what our weaknesses are, and we try to help each other. It's like, okay, hey, you need to work on your faces, your facial expressions, all of those things, and basically it's like being a movie director on a piece of paper.
Wow,
that's you're making all of those decisions of like where's the lighting coming from, where's the camera angle coming from, all of those things. So yeah, I spent a number of years trying to get into the industry where, and again, it was just a learning curve. So thankfully, like I was starting to get other illustration work in doing like newspaper editorial cartoons and illustrations. Again, I did some fashion stuff. I was doing some children's book stuff, but again, learning, like kind of navigating through those different fields. Again, I was like, yeah, I don't want to. Yeah, I'd done some children's book stuff for a while, and I'd gotten an offer from Hallmark to do like greeting cards, because I was like, oh, and again, I wanted to do everything, but I was like, okay, to do greeting cards, but they wanted, I think they were located in like Kansas or something, so you had to move out there. Then I was like, I don't want to draw fuzzy animals all day, So I was like, okay, I'm gonna again concentrate on comic books, and um, I went to conventions and things like that, and you know,
So that's a good piece to know for someone young and wanting to get into, bright-eyed, bushy-tailed wants to get into, start with conventions. I mean, because you meet people there, you get opportunities. But one thing that has changed so drastically, because as I listen to you, I'm like, damn, these kids nowadays, all they got to do is get a link to a website. And I mean, life in terms of the technology and where it has brought illustrators and so many other professions is night and day. You used to have to walk the pavement and hand things in and go to the post office and
hustle.
go to the Xerox machine, as Jose said.
Yeah, you had to hustle. Yeah.
How to what extent has that changed your world? And what was I guess what the learning curve from you being old school, which is a good thing, to having to deal with the technology and learn the technology, cross over into the technology and all that it can do for you as an illustrator?
I think the hustle remains. It's still the same.
Really?
Yeah, I think this is like most careers in the arts. It's still a personable, game. It's still a social. There's still a social factor to figuring out what place you want to occupy in the field, and how you work with others, and what value you can bring to different types of jobs. So my story is very close to Eric's in the sense that I knew that so much of how far I could go would depend on my ability to sell myself and to move into different spaces with a certain amount of confidence, not just in myself, but the work itself, and the work had to be on par. So it meant seeking out people who did this for a living. And that's where the convention thing, like Eric was saying, was so important. I was fairly lucky because in Montreal, we had a very strong illustration sort of community. And often we would have like, just get-togethers where people would draw together and sort of play off each other's work. And I got to meet a few of those people really early on in my career as an illustrator. And at that point, it's really good because you get a sense of where you sit artistically, and in what field you can best offer your skill sets. And a lot of the people I knew would sort of hold me to a higher degree, and you got to work on those eyes, you got to work on those hands, and what are the techniques, and we were using mirrors back then, and we had I would call them graveyards, basically reference libraries, filling drawers with all types of reference we cut out of magazines and things like that. And the actual comic book magazines were sort of our portal to the industry, to the wider industry. We understood that there were people out there who were doing this and what their inspirations were, where they learned their craft. I think that's what artists have been doing for generations, right? You learn what the people who you love, you learn what their interests are and where their inspirations came from. And back then, magazines like Wizard and I think Comic Beat and stuff like that, they would show us sort of like the underpinnings of a finished comic book page. And you could really understand better now how you needed to up your game, what the line work had to look like, what the medium demanded of you as a penciler or an inker or an all-in-one, and then what companies had in terms of approaches to the work, what their pipelines were.
Mhm.
Was it draw first and write later? Was it write first and draw after the fact?
Hmm.
Just figuring that out and how to tell a story in different ways, I think was really important. And then going to conventions when you have no money,
Mhm.
and you have to figure out how to best present yourself, the whole portfolio thing, spending some money on your craft.
Mhm.
And often you would hear 6 months, come back in 6 months, 6 months to a year. I'll see you
Man.
in 6. I got that from Neil Adams and a bunch of other people, and you'd be
Wow.
crushed on the
Yeah.
bus back from
Yeah.
New York. I'd be like, 6 months? That was like 10 years for us back then. Not 18.
Yeah.
And
Oh.
so I remember sending out packages really early. The whole indie sector of illustration of comic books was so robust. There were just so many places where you could apply your skill set and learn in real time in front of everyone.
Like what?
Um,
Like what? I mean, like you said, the whole independent sector, but like what? Like who? What different companies?
Indie comics that were outside of the big two.
Yeah.
Right? There weren't a lot of
Interesting.
companies back then, but
Uh-huh.
you could get a lot of work doing small press stuff, or you could put out your own ashcan, which were really big back then. We would actually draw our own pages, and I think I must have logged like 300-400 of my own personal pages before I started going to conventions, just so I could stand in front of an editor and have some confidence that I wasn't wasting their time,
Mhm.
And that was a huge part of it. Just meeting the extended community, learning from them in Artist Alley, what was necessary to actually do the job. And I think the part I would tell my students for years, ask questions about the lifestyle, because we never knew what were the the plights and the pluses of trying to make a career in this and trying to have a family and dealing with rejection, right? Which is a huge part of
Real
entertainment.
talk. Yeah.
Real talk, yeah.
So many things. I've just got a whole new. There's things people don't even think about, like about different professions you don't even think about. But Eric, one thing you said that it's like a movie director on paper. That's deep. Because a movie director has to have the gaffer to light it, has to have the grip to move things around, have to have the prop person, the storyboard artist, research, and you have to do all of that, one person in your head and
And
bring it out there. I mean, that to me is awesome.
it is, it can be.
Realize.
The thing is, like, working in comics, like, if you're on a monthly book, so it's like it's being creative on demand. Because like a monthly book, you're like Jose said, you don't understand until you're in the industry, until you get that first assignment. Like, you don't understand what you've signed up for. It's like no sleep, but again, you hope that the ideas, like when you're reading through the script, like when I get a script, I read through it twice the first time, then I set it aside and go do whatever else. Then I come back to it, read it again just to make sure I understand what the writer is looking for. And I try to see, and like as I'm reading through it, I'm hoping that ideas are sparking right then and there. And I try to like sketch those out as quickly as I can as I'm reading. And then you start to figure out, okay, what is, like, I always want to be able to give the writer what they're asking for,
Which they don't know a lot of times.
well, yeah, I mean, there, some writers write visually,
Right.
some don't. So it's the ones that don't that you've got to, like, okay, again, understand at least what the thrust of the story is, and then you start to like figure out, okay, how do I get there visually, panel by panel and page by page, to get to the conclusion of this particular issue, understanding that, the to me, I always like more information. I need at least the all of the specific information so that I can tell this story effectively. Like if there need to be details in the background of a particular panel that are going to show up in a later panel or issue, so that we're setting up the scene as clearly as possible. And again, that's why, like, again, as a director, you have people like setting up your scenes and backgrounds and all of those things, recognizing that everything in the background may mean something for it may be foreshortening for something coming down the line. So again, you've got to be aware of all of those things. And like I said, you're the as an illustrator and comic book storyteller. Again, you're the one who's picking the fashions that the characters are wearing. If they're not in costume, it's like, is it a time period piece?
Right.
The hairstyles, the if it's a street scene, is it in the city? Are you drawing skyscrapers? Is it a street scene? All of those things. Like, are there pigeons flying in the background?
Wow.
Is there a dog, peeing on the fire hydrant? All of those things, and because all of those things help people relate to the story.
Right.
And you want to keep their eyes and imaginations engaged. And so, like, when as I was learning to learning the craft of being an illustrator, I remember like making sure I would ask myself a set of questions. It's like, why, how, where, and when? Because it's like, when I looked at the illustrators' works, who the stuff that caught my eye, I would ask myself, well, why am I drawn to these particular pieces of illustration and storytelling? And it was because of, again, all of the details in the background. They paid attention, and I was like, okay, what do I need to do once I can, like, master the basics? How can I set my work apart from other illustrators? It's like, what is this illustrator over here? What are the qualities of Jack Kirby's work? How are they different from the qualities of, say, like Bernie Wrightson or Barry Windsor Smith or Neil Adams? And so, like, they each have different qualities to their work. And again, those were the things that caught my eye. And so, like, at this stage of my I guess career, is like, I want to draw stuff that, if I was to see it on the shelf and I didn't know who drew it, that I would want to buy. So that's how I approach my artwork at this point.
I'm glad that go ahead. I was going to say, I'm glad that you start. My next question was to take us through the process when you get a script, the steps. And I'd just like for you two to talk as animators. I mean, you started to tell us, do you put yourself in a quiet space? Do you go to a loud coffee shop? I mean, how do you transform into that story to produce the images that a lot of times the writers may be clueless about? And I know in film there's Bibles to that story. They have film Bibles where they break down the psychology, where they were from, where their skin color, tone, whatever. What do you all have? There's not a Illustrator's Bible? Maybe that's something y'all can develop. I don't know, but just kind of walk us through. Somebody comes in, brings you a book or brings you a script. What do they tell you? What is the direction? What do they say to you? Just read my script?
I'd love to say that everything begins with the script. I mean, a well-written script I mean, is everything. It's the core of everything you're going to build off, and it's always important to sit down with a writer and find out what's in their head, and how they envision the material actually playing out visually.
Do
And
you
that's
do
whether
that
you're.
before or after you read the script? I'm sorry. Do you talk with the writer?
I always think it's important to talk with the writer before, just to get a sense of who they are as an individual and what their proclivities are, before you read the work. Not to be sort of not to have an advance warning of what the script is about. It should be able to speak for itself. I mean, they know their craft. But then, to, just like Eric said, to be able to go through it and go through it more than once, figure out what your take might be on it, and how you might be able to spin it. For me, as an illustrator, I learned from other illustrators that your toolbox is very important, because you're limited to how you can tell someone else's story or your own by what your visual toolbox is. And so you have to get a sense, as you study other illustrators, which is very important, how to draw different types of things. Like Eric was saying, you have your backgrounds, you have your, and we hate backgrounds when we're younger. It's something that we we stay away from, feet and hands, but you have to take the time to actually fall in love with these things. And hair and steel and water, and different artists have different takes on this. Barry Windsor's water, and maybe another artist steel, so I think you sort of take from different artists the pieces of what you envision for yourself as a final product, and then there are techniques that allow you to tell stories that are really, you're taking from film itself, from the cinematic language of film, which is wide shots versus close-ups and ECUs and pans, and you have to figure out how to translate that through things like pacing and panel work, maybe grabbing emotional features from your characters to show that they're being pensive or contemplating something. And you have to really get into the head of some of your subjects, And so I think reading, getting into literature, and having an affinity for just different types of books and magazines, and understanding how writers sort of construct their worlds and what language they use to describe visual things, visual cues. I think that helps in a really big way. Like, I don't know if Eric came to this realization like I did at some point. You realize you have to learn how to draw small, micro versus macro, because the detail in an eye is very simplified, maybe into one or two lines when it's at a certain distance. So you start studying, how do you draw hair or eyes or hands, really, really small. And that helps you to be able to define a writer's story through different types of panels and camera work. And I found when I jumped to advertising, and I was a storyboard artist, a lot of those shot breakdowns are very clear. You need to know what type of lenses that you might use to capture this story.
Oh, wow.
It's a different set of tools that you're using to tell the same visual work, And so with some directors, it's about action, and you have to understand how not to break the 180 if you're going through a simple conversation between two people or four people. Figuring out things like how lighting can accentuate the story.
Break that down, 180, because for the
180, just understanding where the line is for the camera, so that anybody who's on the left side who's having a conversation doesn't in the next panel jump to the right side, and we sort of get a little confounded, confused as a viewer or as a reader. So just understanding how to best tell the writer's story. And a big part of that is communication and working together, collaboration. Because like you said, Ada, not all writers have that skill set of being able to tell a visual story, and they may be very verbose.
Mm-hmm.
They may love the exposition, and you sort of have to scale that back to, I can't put all of that in one panel. I have to stretch it out into three.
Yeah.
I have to have an action and then a reaction. And sometimes in the heat of writing that awesome story, things get sort of mashed together, and you have to figure out a way to work with writers to help them tell the best stories they can. You know.
Wow. So because you both were drawn into this life with comics, and now I know Eric has illustrated stories of popular icons like Spider-Man, X-Men, Young Justice, and you have created, similar icons and stuff. So what was that like when you saw your drawings brought to life on screen? And also growing up with Spider-Man, or you grew up with Spider-Man, you grew up with those characters that you grew up with. You're drawing them now, and you're drawing them that they're to the point where now everything is action adventure, and things are gone to the screen. What was that like, seeing something that you've storyboarded or drawn that has been taken and brought to life on film or animation?
You want me to take this one?
I mean, were you
well,
like...
for me, I always knew that there was a very clear, almost seamless connection between film and illustration, especially comic books, because of the cinematic quality of capturing the same types of shots. But of course, you're limited to that 22 pages or 24 pages or whatever it is, and there's also a quality of being able to expand your work. Some artists had a lot of real estate to be able to show what they could do and add detail, but you learned right away from the get what type of value you could offer within that time frame. Mm-hmm. Because you have to be really honest with yourself. If it's a page a day, how much detail can you do?
Yeah.
How much time do you actually have to crosshatch an entire panel? Are you losing 4 or 5 hours on that one panel? Or can you move on and have a semblance of an 8-hour day or a 10-hour day? Most comic book artists I knew growing up had other jobs. And so this was mainly a side hustle.
Right.
So you had to be very economical with your choices. And often you would see beautifully rendered covers, but very clean, very pragmatic line work on the interiors of these books. But you were always held to that higher standard of, you really want to be a Travis Charest or Jim Lee or whatever it was from your generation. So you would practice the final product. And getting back to your question, I think my big moment was storyboarding for television. I think I started off doing a lot of commercials for drunk driving, don't drink and drive. And the outcome of doing this, seeing how people might perish or get arrested or things like that. And so I had to incorporate a certain amount of action into my stick form. Mm-hmm. And immediately I was sort of successful with directors in that realm because I had this comic book cinematic background. And so the first few commercials I saw that were literally panel for panel, mm-hmm. It blew my mind, and then to sit in a cinema and see your name, roll up the screen, or to see a sequence that you uniquely worked on with the director one-on-one, crafting how the camera's going to move and how the actors are going to interact with the space.
Wow.
It was really eye-opening. And I went all in. You buy your digital camera, you fight for access to set so that you can take pictures of the environments if they're built or if they're being rented. and it just gives you more fodder to be able to tell that story properly. And then the rest is really whether I mean in film and television, you're not working with the writer, you're working with the director or production designer, and really understanding their vision and what they want covered, and how you can um, draw in a way, especially if you're doing action, in a way that's safe for the actors, and the actual crew can understand what the parameters of that scene is, in terms of building props and staging, and where are you going to put the crew when we're shooting? Are we all going to hide behind this wall? Or are we going to be in a park somewhere? And you learn that your work has value on so many levels to different departments. And I think the biggest realization for me was when I walked onto a production stage and I saw my boards on the walls, just covering the walls, and they were circling what they were going to do on that day and how they were going to break down my shots. And often the director's so busy that you have to run this, right? Like Eric was saying, you're the director in a sense. That was another realization. This scene or this commercial is on your back because they trust that you understand the language of film and that you can communicate this in a way that we've seen it before. And unless there's any specific direction, like a camera that goes on forever, or any specific cuts, so you can show different elements in the scene, it's on you. You are the director for the most part.
So it was easy to shift over for you to be an award-winning director. It was an easy shift because you're directing on paper, like Eric said. You're directing on paper.
It's the same thing.
Yeah, that's awesome. What about you, Eric? What was your aha moment? What was that moment that brought it all together for you, seeing your work?
Well, I think like seeing your work, like the finished product of something that you've worked on for weeks and months, whether you're seeing it on the shelf of a store, of a comic book store, or in a like I've done animatics for like ads and things like that, but just seeing the work finished and seeing people's reaction to it and recognizing that like for me it's like that they appreciate what you do and that they're trusting you with what whether it's whether it's their characters, or again selling this product, or again just telling us that story, that particular story. So when I guess it was when I was working with this writer, L.A. Banks. She was writing a Vampire Huntress novels, not graphic novel series. And I had moved back to Philadelphia. I guess this was around 2004 or so. But I was introduced to her at a book signing. It was L.A. Banks, Octavia Butler, Anna Reeve Dew, Stephen Barnes, what's the gentleman's name? Samuel Delaney. It was the first time I'd ever even gone to a book signing. I actually before I went there, I didn't even know what a book signing was. I thought it was going to be people who had read their books, it's like sitting around talking about their favorite parts of the book. I didn't, so to find out that they were actually there, I was like, wow, okay. So L.A. Banks and I, we made a connection because she lived here, and she lived in Philadelphia, and actually she didn't live too far from me. But I knew I wanted to put some visuals to a novel, So, and at first, in going to the when I found out that the authors were actually going to be at this signing, I had at that point I had already read some of Octavia Butler's work, and I was familiar with it, and I was like, oh, I'm going to approach her about like maybe putting some visuals to some of her novels.
I want to see Wild Seed, but anyway, go ahead.
Well, that's coming.
Oh, I want to see that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but you know, when I got to the signing and I saw just seeing all of these authors on stage talking about their works, you could see I could see that Octavia Butler was like, she was painfully shy, and she spoke about that. She was very, very shy, but like L.A. Banks was like so gregarious, and again, she just had this other energy. So I was like, I think I might have a better chance of like approaching her, and I did. And so realizing that she was writing these prose novels about vampires and things, putting together like character drawings for them, we had to be very, very careful, because when you read a prose novel, you're picturing everybody's picturing the scenes in a different way. They're picturing their versions of, like, say, whatever the protagonists and the antagonists, what they look like. Mm-hmm. So that she trusted me to kind of, with basically, I mean, these were her characters, these were her stories, but to me it felt like she was trusting me. It was like she was trusting me with her babies. Mm-hmm. So I was like, I had to be very careful and intentional about how I approached the visuals to creating these visuals for these stories, because once we put them out, people are, she had an event. She had a book. One of the novels was coming out, and she had a big event here in Philadelphia where like readers were coming in from all over for this big event. It was like a weekend event. Like, she had rented a bus to like take readers around to like different sites in the books.
Oh wow!
There was going to be a slumber party. It was a big thing. So the first night, they had she had rented out a restaurant, where everybody, all of the readers were gonna, come in, meet and, just, talk about the books and everything. So anyway, I get there, and one of the readers was like, "Hey, you drew," like, so one of the protagonists, the main protagonist in her novels was a character named Damali, the Vampire Huntress. She was like, you drew, well, Damali's, I guess, love interest was his name was Carlos. And she was like, one of the readers was like, "Hey, you drew Carlos like, looking like this, but that's not the way that I pictured him." And again, it's like, at that point, it's like
interpretation. Yeah,
it's all interpretation. But again, once the drawing is out there, once the visual is out there, readers have to kind of shift their what what they thought into what they're seeing now.
Right.
So it's like, again, it's like the translation of books, of novels to movies. It's like, well, what in the book, the writer describes Tyrion Lannister as, having blonde hair and, all this kind of stuff. And then you see the actor in the Game of Thrones series, and it's like, well, okay, there's some similarities, but then, again, there's always going to be a difference.
Yeah.
And, you try to explain, why you made certain decisions, and why, again, why you chose certain elements to include and certain elements to, like, omit. Mm-hmm. But again, I don't know if did I answer your question? I'm just rambling.
But you made a great point, because artists don't always know what's involved in working with licensed characters, right?
Creative license, you mean?
Well, no, just a company or or an individual that owns a character that created it, and so it has its own visual language. It has its own identity out there in the real world, and people expect the characters to look and sound exactly as they were read on the page, or as they look if it's Batman or it's Superman or whoever it is. And so I think it really doesn't matter what medium you're in. If you go into an atmosphere, a job atmosphere where you're dealing with licensed work, you have to draw to the specifications of the estate or the company or the art director. You know, and sometimes they set the pace. This is how the lines are going to look, and this is, can you morph into my style?
That sounds stressful.
Well, that's animation, right?
That sounds stressful. I mean, to have to follow the Batman, the Spider-Man that you grew up with, because he has transformed and gotten more hip and modern from the comic books back in the, you know, maybe the 60s, 70s, 80s, whatever. So that just sounds stressful, having to stay in that, as opposed to having the freedom. Like, what is that behind you? Was that your freedom, Eric, to totally do this character behind you? I see Charlie Parker on one side and
oh yeah, so that's John Coltrane. And,
Coltrane.
Yeah, I did that for an organization called the Philadelphia Jazz Project.
Oh, you drew that?
Yes.
Oh, wow, I thought that was a poster. Cool.
Oh yeah, they turned it into a flag because they had events going on around the city.
That is cool.
That is awesome.
But like this,
I saw it on your Insta page. It was incredible.
Thanks. But like, so this is one of the drawings that I did of L.A. Banks's characters, and that's Damali and Carlos. So
now, how do you think about something like that? Like, what? I mean, that is like, where do you have to go in your brain to pull out that type of monster?
It's not hard. That's the thing. I'm a big fan of horror stories, and like, you know, again, just always reading Alfred Hitchcock and like, you know, reading Stephen King and all of those things. Like, the scarier the better for me, you know. But going back to something that Jose said in terms of like drawing licensed characters, like with animation, yeah, you're drawing the characters in a specific style for that animation. But the great thing about a character like Batman or Spider-Man, when you're drawing comic books, their outlines and their costume designs are so iconic that every artist can draw Batman, and as long as you see that silhouette, and as long as you see the bat ears, you know who it is, no matter whether the, you know, it's an abstract painting of Batman, or, you know, it's like you're gonna recognize his silhouette. You're gonna recognize the Spider-Man webbing and, you know, eyes and everything. So, you know, whether an artist draws in a cartoony style, whether he draws in a realistic style, that's the importance of the design elements that go into creating characters. And again, that goes into the graphic design parts and the fashion design parts, because in creating characters, you want to try to figure out elements of creating a character that are going to make it stand out and be different from everything else that you've seen out there. And there's a lot of stuff out there, you know. So like the other day I was watching that movie, The Tomorrow War. Was it Chris? What's his last name? Chris. The guy. Yeah, Chris Pratt. But like, I mean, it's, you know, it's an okay movie, but like for me, the design of the creatures is just, they're just fantastic. So I mean, I you know, and I put that movie on mute just to, like, you know, every time while I'm drawing, I'm looking up, and as long as I'm seeing those creatures, I'm just like, man, those are incredible. Because of again, when you look at the.
Meanwhile, I'm turning the channel because I don't like horror and creatures.
You know what we used to do back in the day? We used to record movies on cassettes, and back when I had my school, we would just put the cassette tape, you know, in a boombox and listen to Aliens, or you know what I mean, or our favorite movie, or The Exorcist, or whatever it is. And we learned really early on that sound plays a huge part in communicating. How to communicate that visually. You see how directors use strobe lights and a siren in the background, and maybe lights, but it's droning, and you try and communicate that through 2D illustration as best you can. But if you get a chance to incorporate that through other mediums, to amalgamate sound and lighting, and you can build tension and mood and pacing. So yeah, I mean, I think Eric was talking about a lot of really cool elements of character design and strong silhouettes, which is a part of the process of building characters, right? Just having a really iconic silhouette that you can fill out, you know, based on a character's personality and their occupation and their life history, and figure out a way to have that character connect somehow on some level with their audience. Right.
So that's interesting. So you would put yourself, when you're drawing, maybe put the music on for inspiration, certain type of music.
Right. Yeah.
That's putting yourself.
Yeah, because it's sometimes it sets you in a mood. You know, it gives you if it's a dire mood, or a pensive mood, or an action-packed sort of adrenaline-filled rush that you're going through, where you may be using speed lines to communicate something. You may draw less backgrounds and concentrate more on the character motion, and so your line of motion is more fluid. You know, you want to show large impacts and sweeping motion in a sense. And then when it's a quiet moment, maybe you want to push in and have something that's close up and a little more diluted in the background, so we get a sense of the emotional currency that's at play, you know?
One of the things, I wish I could talk to y'all forever, but I know y'all have to. Can you believe an hour is up, and I still haven't asked you, like, there's just two things. So I wanted to know, one, are there some bucket list projects that you want to produce, or is there anything you're working on now that you can talk about, that you're excited about? Because Eric's always like, oh, I'm so busy. So there's some things coming in. Is there anything you can talk about, or anything that you really want to do yourself in terms of creating and instead of drawing somebody else's book, but your own thing? I mean, is that in the orbit?
Well, there's always, like, there's not enough time in a day.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And we're at such an amazing point in history, creatively, and because of the state of affairs with the pandemic, and the internet that really raised the bar. I mean, when the internet popped up, I was posting my artwork on like 14, 15 sites. It took like 6-7 hours a day, you know, and that self-marketing and social media aspect is really allowed us to raise our game and connect with our potential future partners and things like that, so that we can collaborate on projects that we care about. So on my end, a lot of those collaborations are leaning towards the stuff I love. Short film. I have a bunch of stuff on my docket that I'm putting through my company. I'm producing some scripts for some Canadian broadcasters up here. I'd love to dip more heavily into, and this is the ultimate aim, working with volume stages, you know, these new stages that are being built all over the country. You have tons of them on your side of the border. We have a few up here where you can make productions like The Mandalorian and bring a 3D space, a 3D aspect to your filming, and actually use the backlighting of these stages to inform your characters and your mood. So that's something I'm really excited about, telling stories in that digital space. And of course, audio. figuring out how to create stories in an audio space that allows me to maximize what I'd like to think is a model that most large companies are leaning in towards, which is the transmedia model. Being able to have a comic book and a film and a web series and maybe an audio series that take into account different aspects of the story that you're trying to tell, or from different perspectives. So that's what I'm doing. Basically, the transmedia outlook. Yeah.
Exciting. What about you, Mr. Battle? Both of y'all have like famous last names. Kathleen Battle Opera and Jeffrey Holder. I mean,
Nothing beats
might
Battle.
be some relations there. Hey.
Nothing beats Battle. I'm sorry.
I know.
I thank my mother. But well, so for the past I'd say 2 years or so, I've been working on BLAM. I sent.
Thank you for. I got mine. Yay! Yes, that's awesome.
So with is Black Lives Always Mattered: Hidden African American Philadelphia of the 20th Century. I was brought in to curate and art direct this graphic novel, and it gave me the opportunity to work with other illustrators and writers whose work, again, I admired for a long time. So that we actually have it in hand. It's a lot of really exciting things have been transpiring since we have the book published now. We have it up on Amazon now. We have it up on Temple's website. I have a number of different events coming up that are featuring the book. So I'm excited about all of those. And again, always hoping that this will be the first of many more. So at some point, I'm hoping to be able to reach out to more artists to tell more stories.
Do like a series of extended to a series of books.
Yeah, because the thing is, so this book, it features 14 African Americans from Philadelphia, but I mean the list that we had, we whittled it down to 14, but there's so many, and the reality, you can do this kind of thing in every city, because there are people everywhere who are doing incredible things in their respective cities. So yeah, that's out now. Again, I'm working on the graphic novel project with John Jennings Megascope imprint, and I'm excited about it because it's honestly like one of the most, I'd say, important projects of my career. It's like, I've had fun drawing Batman and Spider-Man and those characters, but this I'm drawing the graphic novel is the story of Emmett Till, and I mean, it's such a, we know the story, but putting it in visual form and with the information that I have, and the writer is Christopher Benson. He was the lawyer who got the case reopened. So, I'm working on that again. Really excited, and juggling a couple of other projects. But those are the main things going on right now. I'll probably another couple of hours, I've got to make a decision on a project with DC.
Couple of hours. Ooh.
Yeah, so yeah, again,
go for it.
Right, but yeah, like you say though, that there's only there's not enough time. There's not enough time in the day, and it's like you want to do everything and you want to do it all, but you want to do it well.
Yeah.
So we'll
one of the things. Thank you for that. One of the things that I was thinking, that two things that are really important for kids and youth and just aspiring illustrators that are watching. One is can you talk about, I mean, your value now? You know your value now, and so to let them know that there's a price point. I mean, in terms of what you bring in, what you're making, how do they know, get to the point where they know their value? What is the range of what they should be targeting for in terms of pay for an illustrator? Things like that are important because a lot of times people think that their particular skill of drawing is not valuable or not valued and they can't make a living out of it. They can't survive off of it. But you two have seemed to have gone through your struggles and now you're at a point where there's challenges more so, but you're able to meet them and get projects in without, you don't have agents, do you? Without agents and all that stuff.
I don't.
It's just coming to you. So it's just word of mouth pretty much at this stage in your life.
Yeah.
That you
I think for most, I guess, respected or most illustrators who are in demand, I mean, at some point you create a client base that you rely on, and you have to have faith that your work is up to snuff, and they'll tell you. I think the market will define, for the most part, when you're ready or not. And that's why I think it's so important to find your community, whether it's in film or it's in television or video games, whatever it is. It's never been easier. You don't have to go all the way across the country or, abroad to find out what's happening in your market. What are the new books coming out? What are the new IPs? What studios or imprints are now about to pop? And just figuring out how to communicate with those people, how to be respectful, how to present yourself in a particular way. There's certain unwritten rules, to have a portfolio online. I think it's really important. I'm always bringing people into the industry, and I'm always sort of shocked when I come across someone who doesn't know that they should have an online portfolio or maybe a presence, a social media presence of some sort, Instagram, Facebook, whatever it is, to be able to make it easier for other people to find you, to use your actual name, your full name, to represent yourself properly, and to sort of like bridge the gap between a very solitary job description that we have and make it more sociable, so you don't feel like all of the world's plights are on you. You have to understand how to navigate it, and maybe how to set up a circle of friends and family that support you and give you that motivation to move on to the next step in your career, because there's nothing that can take the air out of your sales faster than negativity
or rejection.
Well, rejection is part of the game.
Yeah.
But negativity, I mean, as an art director or as a director, as anyone who leads other artists, you understand the importance of momentum. Momentum is everything. There's nothing like taking a person's work and not giving it a constructive feedback and picking at it for various reasons. And really what you're doing is picking at the soul of the artist. They'll draw more into themselves and maybe be less likely to have some sort of creative liberty in the work. So understanding how to work with different people in the space is really, really important, I'd say.
Yeah.
Okay. What about you?
Like know your industry and be professional. Meet your deadlines. And again, doing those things so that recognizing if an art director or editor, when they reach out to you, they recognize your value, but you need to be able to recognize your value.
Right.
So in terms of like pricing and those sorts of things, there are books out there. There's a book that's printed. I think they print it every year or every other.
Y'all aren't unionized, are you?
There are no unions up here for artists per se, but I know for storyboard artists in the States, there's a union.
Oh, okay, I didn't know that. Okay, I'm sorry, Eric. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
But yeah, there are books. There's an Illustrators ethical guidelines and price. Like it tells you how to price different types of work. But again, you just need to know your industry, be professional. Um, don't be afraid to ask for what you want, but you've got to be able to gauge your own work.
Mm-hmm.
And honestly, you got to be honest with yourself to know whether it stands up to the stuff that's already out there.
Mm.
It's so like part of being an artist and like kind of like being able to accept criticism and not let criticism like completely defeat you. You kind of have a you kind you need to have
Skin.
a healthy ego in a sense, again, to like be like, okay, and realize everybody's not going to like what you do, everybody's not going to like your work, and that's okay. The thing is, nowadays with the internet, again, it's made it easier for people to find their audience
Mm-hmm.
and recognize that somebody's looking for what you're doing, and it's easier to connect with those people who are looking for what you're doing, but you have to do it, because it's like, and again, that goes into recognizing what goes into this work. It's hard work. It looks fun. It looks fun, when it's in front of you, but like getting the work, taking the work from an idea to a script to a finished piece, it's hard work. So, like telling kids, again, and it's a job. It's a job too. It's a career. It's a job that can turn into a career. But you have to do the work.
I'd like to add something you were saying there. Um, After you've done everything Eric has said, um, I think it's important for artists to understand uh, the pipeline of the types of mediums that they're applying to,
Mhm.
and to reverse engineer those pipelines. Um, Often, what I'll
Break
see.
that down. Break that
Okay,
down.
all right. Let's run it back. Often, what I'll see in portfolios or what I'll hear in requests is, I'd like to get into X market. What do I need? What do I need to have represented in my portfolio? And hopefully, they say portfolio.
Mm-hmm.
um, so in comic books, obviously, it's a span of a few pages that has different elements. Maybe a quiet moment, an action moment, uh, showing some background, an appreciation for backgrounds as well as for characterization, emotional currency, facial expressions, things like that. Maybe an understanding of light and shadow, you might say, Eric. Um, and really getting a sense of a beginning, a middle, and an end. I think it's very important to tell a story in those pages.
Mm-hmm.
In video games, the pipeline's completely different, and you may need to specialize and focus on what area of that market you want to enter. So, is it characters? Is it backgrounds? Is it environments? Is it animation? Is it rigging? Is it, you know what I mean? Is it texturing? So if it's characters, then you have to show the types of uh, what art directors would expect from you coming into the industry. Silhouettes, um, different types of color, design work, um, maybe different types of variations on a theme. I think that's
Mm-hmm.
very important. They need to see how your mental process is,
Mm-hmm.
putting together a character, maybe what your references are, what your underpinnings, your sketching or line work is. Um, are you photo bashing? Are you taking reference from different spots and making something?
Mm-hmm.
Are you using 3D software to inform your backgrounds or your character models, whatever they are? You have to understand those pipelines. And before you enter that craft, understand that the people who are experts in that field will judge you based on that expertise that you bring. So character artists will judge a character artist, environmental artists will judge, and so on and so on. So you need to figure out what that pipeline is, and understand that, like, I'll give you another example. In storyboarding, I didn't know coming in that I could work for the agency side or I could work for the production house side. And I learned early on that the structure would be an agency would receive a pitch from like a McDonald's or a Walmart for a commercial. It would be written. It might be illustrated from an illustrator in the agency. Mm-hmm. And then that pitch goes out to several production houses. And a director selected in each of those production houses will do their version of that commercial. And so you might be one of the artists selected to pair up with a director to do that version. And if you're lucky enough, and it's a small enough industry, what you'll find happening is you actually get double booked. Like you'll be on the same commercial with, two houses. So you learn different aspects of the medium. And with storyboarding, it's about speed and communicating a vision mostly through realism. There's not much space for a lot of embellishment because people eat with their eyes first, and they want to be able to understand what it is based on their world, the real world. So yes, reverse engineering what you want to do, and then finding people in that medium to tell you what's expected, how long it should take, and maybe based on your skill set, what you can charge at that stage of your career. It doesn't make sense to ask a professional who's done something for 20 years, what's your rate? Or 10 years or 15 years. Because you have to build up to that, And the last thing I would say to this point is that with technology being what it is, I noticed this transition happening in comic books really early. The all-in-one artist. A lot of companies outside of the big two were expecting an artist to be able to pencil, ink, and sometimes color their own work. And that changes the rate. It changes your speed. It changes your focus on each aspect. In video games, you can't just draw line work. I mean, you have to be able to offer more value. So that you're not in this sort of contractual abyss. Can you paint? Can you do a little 3D? You know what I mean? Can you sculpt? Whatever it is, it adds to your value, and you can create a career out of that.
Wow, this has been amazing. How can people reach you? Is that through Stillwalker Productions?
For me, it's Stillwalker Productions, or thanks, it popped up right there, or I'm on social media all the way across. Can I throw a quick shout out to some of the stuff I'm working on?
Yeah, I'm going to edit some stuff in, but yeah, go ahead.
All right. So I have a book coming out with Aftershock Comics.
You can hold it up. Can you hold it up or no?
Yeah. Actually, I got my comps just the other day, so that's the cover.
Last line.
It's by Aftershock, written by Richard Dinnick. Myself on the art chores, and Kelly Fitzpatrick on the color, and Dave Sharp on the line. So this is the type of madness you'll get a chance to
and that's
enjoy.
On Amazon?
You could get it online. You can get it at a local comic book shop. I would suggest going to aftershockcomics.com to figure out where you might be able to order it. And on the side, my main job, my 9 to 5, I'm a senior concept illustrator for Warner Brothers Games, and we're about to launch Gotham Knights.
Yes.
So,
wait! I can't wrap my head. A Malcolm X game?
No. Gotham Knights. It's the next in the Batman video game franchise, and this focuses on what we call the orphans. All of the 4 main characters that Batman has really helped shape, their careers and
Oh, I'm
their.
tripping. I went somewhere else. I'm like, that's gaming.
But that
Okay,
would be
we're
cool.
in
That would be
fantasy world. Woo! Okay.
So October 21st is when that game launches.
Where can they look for that? Where can people? Is it just?
You're going to be able to buy that anywhere.
Gonna be all in their face.
Go on, yeah. You could buy that, in stores. You can buy that online. I know they'll be on Xbox or PS5. And October 21st, that's the big day.
Oh, that's the same month our festival, October. So.
That's it. It's a busy month.
Yes.
So, say, is the book that you did with Aftershock, is that out yet, or is that when is that coming out?
That's coming out this month. So later this month, you'll be able to find it.
Which is the month of September.
Yep.
We're recording this, and then we're gonna play this in October. So cool.
Awesome. So it would have already been out, and you can enjoy. It's part of a 4-issue series that I'm working on with them. So yeah,
that's
and
exciting.
You were working with Mike Martz on that, right?
That's right.
Nice.
The infamous Mike Martz. I remember sending him envelopes when he was at Marvel. And now I'm working with him.
Awesome.
As an editor, and he's
in
just
Toronto.
amazing.
I mean, in Montreal, and that's
in Montreal, and he's in the States. Yeah.
Yeah. Beauty of it.
Nice.
God bless the internet.
Yes. Well, Eric, where can people reach you?
I guess
I know you don't have time. Y'all need virtual assistants. Like seriously.
True.
Like hello.
Yeah. Like I have a Facebook page and Instagram, so I'll pop up on there every now and then. But
what's your Instagram handle?
Battle lines are drawn.
BATTLE lines.
Yeah.
ARE or just R?
Just R. Just the letter R.
R drawn.
Drawn.
That name keeps on giving. It just keeps on giving. Thanks to your mom, man. Thanks to your mom.
Battle lines are drawn. I like that. Yeah, there is a lot you can do with that.
Yeah.
I love it. Well, gentlemen, this has been, I don't know if y'all realize it, but we went over 30 minutes, but I just couldn't stop. I was just like, let's see.
Yes.
So much. This has been wonderful. And the great thing is that, children and just aspiring illustrators, youth students are going to be watching this. And I think that they will be very inspired by what you're doing, what you're contributing, the legacy you're leaving behind for them to continue to pick up and keep it moving. So thank you. And God, I wish y'all could come this way. Maybe another festival, another year. We'll come back to animation in Black.
Sounds good.
Yes.
But we're looking forward to seeing all that's coming, all that's ahead. So you all have a blessed rest of your week, and all the best with moving forward with the projects you're working on.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Yes.
You're welcome.
It's been an absolute pleasure.